Start.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are. We just greet you and say that welcome to the dialogue. Today, we are putting on the how we want to specifically discuss about the crisis in the Horn of Africa. Most of us know what's going on in the Horn of Africa right now. So we want to have an overview of what has happened last week, what the trajectory is, what will happen. We have two special guests. Both, most of you know, Minister Goulet and Major Ato Atnafu, who are both have, they don't want to say it, but military background, political background, and but at the same time know what's going on in Ethiopia and Somalia, basically. First, I will start. Both of you, welcome to the dialogue. Anyway. So Ato Atnafu is the program director for the Amharic program, but nowadays are in a little bit of out of how would I put Atnafu? Given a break, but we'll come back and we'll be having programs every Saturday, eventually discussing about the current political issues in the Horn of Africa since everything is getting serious. So I will start with Atnafu. Atnafu, welcome to the program. Can you give us a little bit of overview of what's happening in the Horn of Africa? What's the perspective of all Ethiopians, and what's the perspective of academics and everyone else? Please.
Thank you, Brother Yasin. With the connection okay? I see. I heard a breakup from. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you, our viewers. Well, the Ethiopian situation is getting worse from time to time. We have been alarming our community and our people since the Abiy Ahmed regime came into power. The East African politics got messed up in many political, economic, and diplomatic sphere. That's going from worse to worst. So the good thing now is not only the Ethiopians or people in the Horn of Africa are understanding what's going bad in Ethiopia, but the international community is paying attention to what's going on in Ethiopia and trying to figure out how the East of Africa, Eastern Africa as a region and Ethiopia as a country can get out of this mess. So that's a good thing because the international community has been complacent to what's going on by the Abiy regime for so long, even though they have been trying to pressure through economic means, such as boycotting the budget, subsidies and other parts, but they were not serious about him. But now they are getting serious because the situation is getting out of control in that region because of what's going on by the Abiy regime. So trying to focus on the Amhara region area because that is a place now where war is going on almost everywhere in that region. It's not only the Amhara region, but Oromia and other regions, including Somali regions that your community belongs, is in the verge of war at this time. It's not only war, more than 20 million people are also in danger of food insecurity in Ethiopia. That's why the international community is very much alarmed this time. But again, trying to focus on the Amara region, what's going on is, if I tell you what happened in one small city in Marawi in North Gojam, very 35 kilometers from the capital city Bahardar, the Abiy military massacred more than 150 innocent people, going door to door and massacring, including small children, including pregnant women, and just calling out from their home, kneeling down on the asphalt and just shooting them. So that's already in the attention of the international community. This has been probably one of the uh, atrocities, the worst atrocities that we have seen since the war began. And we are um, trying to work with the international community to make who did these atrocities and war crimes to face justice in the international tribune. Right now, as of today, this morning, the Abiy Defense Forces already uh, consolidated its power and moved into Western Gojam and North Gojam, and my own localities and areas where I was born is fighting with the defense forces starting today. They invaded many areas in massive numbers, and mechanized brigades are already included in that attack. And drones, there were two drone attacks just yesterday, targeting the Fano leaders and the public. But unfortunately, they didn't get what they want, but they killed innocent people as usual. So that's what's going on in the Hamara region, and this invasion and atrocities such as human rights violations. You can name it extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearance, arbitrary arrest, censorship of unjustified arrest of journalists, use of child soldiers, and widespread violence in international humanitarian um, human rights and humanitarian and refugees laws is violated in that region since they declared state of emergency about now 7 months ago, and now they extended it for 4 additional months. That my area, my region, my people are under siege. The same is true in Tigray region. The Tigray region, more than 3.5 million, the Tigrayans are under verge of dying for starvation. There is no food at all, and they are under siege. Oromia region, as we have been hearing, the fight is going on. Unfortunately, very close to the capital city, Debre Zeit or Bisheftu area, where it's about 40 kilometers from Addis Ababa. There is a big monastery, which is 500, more than 500 years old monastery, where monks and people who are dedicated Orthodox monks are already residing, and a lot more than 300 uh, traditional Orthodox church students and the monasteries. They killed 4 of them. Not only killed them, they took them far away from the monastery by barefoot. They abused them physically and mentally. These people were just has no relationship with anything in political terms, but they were
Okay.
dedicated to Christians, and people go there to, just as many people go to Mecca, people go there to worship God. Period. So they abused them physically first, and they killed them, and they in the forest, and they. So this is where we are now, Yasin. So
From yeah, we'll have a good discussion. I'll give the floor to Goulet, Mr. Goulet.
mm,
The floor is yours.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Greetings to everyone. I think when we're discussing the situation within the Horn of Africa, it's often very fluid. Things can
Mhm.
change relatively quickly. Things can become drastically sort of changed by the winds from the outside. But what we're doing today, based on the reporting of the situations that are on the ground, and then we layer on the perspectives of the international community and people that are deeply interested and invested in the region. And then our hope is to have a perspective for the future. And so within that framework, we're having an intellectual discussion regarding multilateral, bilateral relations between the countries in the Horn of Africa, sort of dynamic uh, situations within each country. And I think Ethiopia, the reason why we start with Ethiopia is it is the biggest country in the Horn of Africa, has borders every country in the Horn of Africa. And to that extent, if things in Ethiopia improve drastically, that they will be felt by the neighboring countries. And if things deteriorate drastically, they will similarly be felt by neighboring countries. So I think since Mr. Atnafu covered Ethiopia, if I can cover the other side of the Horn of Africa, or at least some parts of it, we know that this week Somalia has signed and passed an agreement with maritime security agreement with Turkey. And that agreement was a two-part agreement. The first part was military, training the Somali Coast Guard, equipping and getting them basically up to speed so that they can monitor their own seas. That is a 10-year window, and both countries were very hopeful of that agreement. The second half of that agreement was an economic part where they called it the blue economy, and the oil and gas and fishing, essentially natural resources within the Somali waters, will be Turkey will help sort of take those items to market, such as oil, and then Turkey will keep 30% of the profit. Somalia keeps 70% of the profit. Again, both countries took that agreement to be something that it was going to be beneficial to both sides. And at the same time, people in Somalia were hoping that that would create a general and extended sort of a safety blanket for the region, and particularly for Somalia. So, what we see, the dynamics that are going on within the Horn of Africa, are countries within the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, Somalia, particularly. Those are the two. When you talk about land, mass, those are the two that sit on the largest land masses. And what happens in either of those countries impacts everyone else. So what we see is that those two countries are on different trajectories, if you will. Somalia, in a sense, is on a trajectory of looking and finding avenues for stability, avenues for somehow making this government business work. With respect to the Somaliland Ethiopia MOU, that was seen within the Somali context, particularly at the political level, and sometimes at the social level. It's something that could get in the way of that trajectory that Somalia has been on the past decade or so. Conversely, in Ethiopia, at the political level, that MOU was seen as a relief, if you will, for the government that has stated for some time the hopes of having an access to the waterways in the Red Sea. The dynamic there, though, is that while within Somalia, the forces opposed to the Somali government are mainly the extremists. The issue with Somaliland in the north is a political issue that can be sort of resolved given the right political environment, versus in Ethiopia, where you have the internal strife is not with extremists, but it is with an ethnic based, if you will, in terms of movements. It is a. I'm hoping that it's not an echo similar to what we've seen before, in that the dynamic in terms of the conflict within the Amar region that Ms. Atnafu was giving us some details on. We hope that that is at the very basic limited, but to an extent that they found a solution for it quickly, because at this pace, the Amhara region is central to in terms of Ethiopia, and in terms of the political longevity of Ethiopia. So the Amhara region is not solved in terms of the fighting and in a diplomatic political way. then the extent to that explosion, if you will, can impact the greater Horn of Africa.
Okay, so I want to go deep in terms of the MOU and in terms of the conflict in Ethiopia within Ethiopia. But first, I just want to highlight what's happening both in European Union circle and the Western circle. When I say Western, I mean the U.S. So I just want a couple clips, and then we'll have the discussion. Let's first start with the American perspective.
Anything that happens within Ethiopia is inextricably tied to the security, the safety of the rest of the region. When Ethiopia has an internal conflict that may make it decide to withdraw forces from Somalia, now you have 5 African Union countries that are also affected, and Somalia. You have the potential for violent extremist organizations to have greater activity there. We also see enduring conflicts or points of tension. The border risks of that turning, or perhaps with the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam with the GERD, that it would change the calculus there. There's a risk that other countries may look at Ethiopia's internal focus as an opportunity to take something, whether it be a military action or stronger political action, when Ethiopia is not credibly able to either continue operations or negotiation.
In the event Addis Ababa falls, what role can this base take? What role can the U.S. military take to deal with the impact of that fall?
So a primary role for our command here is to be able to respond to crisis, and in particular to
So from the U.S. perspective, and the question that's been asked, if you can hear it, I want to make sure that the BBC, we are thanking the BBC for this interview, is when Addis Ababa falls, that is the discussion people are having right now. Not if, it's when. So I'll start with you, Gulet, and then I'll go jump into Aknafu. Gulet, what's the interpretation from the U.S. Perspective from this interview?
Well, I think the if we expand on the interview and listen to the whole interview, the perspective that you get, or the narrative that's being built out, is that Ethiopia is going to have a serious internal conflict, even dissolve. So what he's essentially saying is, with respect to the U.S. command in Djibouti, what they are worried about is, given the premise that Ethiopia will do that, then they're worried about how it impacts the regional neighbors. And he mentioned Somalia with the extremists. I think it's fairly healthy to give a general pushback on that narrative. I don't think it's in the benefit of Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa if that should happen. And I think the narrative has to be one that is more academically inclined versus, but the narrative from the translation is simple, that they expect and they're preparing for a drastic change within the stability and security of Ethiopia, and how that can impact the region as a whole, and what their mandate is in terms of maintaining security as per the agreements that they've had with Djibouti and Somalia. And I think there's an agreement also with the U.S. and military in Ethiopia.
Okay. Atanafu, your perspective for that interview.
Well, countries, including US, have their own interest, national interest. They are there to promote the interest of the US government and the United States as a country. They can influence in many aspects of the region. They have been influencing positively sometimes negatively. But in my opinion, whether US or EU, Turkey or other Gulf states may help us if when we are strong enough to protect our own country in that region. It's very interesting when Guled already mentioned about the Turkish agreement with the Republic of Somalia for 10 years, including the blue economy and the protection of the sea. To my opinion, the result of the unprofessional and unprovoked action by Abiy Ahmed made the Somali government to take this desperate action. But I don't think, or I don't believe this is the best interest. This isn't the best interest of the Somali people or the region. I see it like foreign governments trying to control us because we couldn't manage our own problems, either Somali or Ethiopia. That's shame for our people and for us, the citizens of that region. I think we have to promote independence in economic, independence in political space, but passing everything to foreign powers.
Fair enough.
Control your economy and political situation. That is a recipe for another conflict in the region.
So having said that, so let's go deep into this. Turkey not only had a military agreement with Somalia and Djibouti, but it has with Ethiopia. It provides the drone. It provides close to $7 billion stabilization in terms of support, training, and everything else. So Turkey is playing both sides.
So Turkey is playing both sides. It's dangerous for both sides. It's dangerous for the people of Ethiopia. It's dangerous for the people of Somalia. It's eroding our independence. We should be able to take care of our security. And if the government is unable to do so, they need to go out of the way of the Somali people, out of the way of the Ethiopian people. But Turkey, whether interfering in Ethiopia in our own affair, including providing drone or other economic assistance, didn't help us. They made us kill 1 million people in the Tigray war using the drones. Now they are enabling Abiy Ahmed to kill thousands of Amaras in my region. And they continue now in Somalia on both sides. Think it in a diplomatic way. How could one country be on both sides at the same time when they're fighting for access to the sea? What is the source of the problem between the Republic of Somalia and Ethiopia? And how could Turkey plays a role on both sides? This is a dirty game, dirty political game. It's a dangerous game for the instability of that region. We need to kick them out from any region, whether it is Ethiopia or Somalia. That's my perspective.
Okay, I know, Guled, you have your reaction, but can I just play the EU video? Then we'll get back to your response to this.
Concerns the EU. Very often when the EU is dealing with characters that are seen to have been behaving poorly, we have two different approaches. We either say, oh, it's very important to keep the channels open, or we say, oh no, he's too bad to talk to. So my question to you is, given that Abiy Ahmed has shown so little respect for human rights and has clearly been responsible for some serious atrocities, how do you think the EU should be engaging with Abiy Ahmed? Thank you very much.
Dr. Sarah Vaughan.
Thank you, Chair. I think there were 6 points addressed to me. I'll try to cover them each briefly. Firstly, the notion that Ethiopia could provide food for everyone if only things were better organized. This, in my view, is nonsense. Production has increased in certain parts of Oromia this year, wheat production, but it's clear that domestic prices remain extremely high, and it's very unclear what that total production amounts to. I very much hope that WFP is in negotiations with the government about doing as much as it can to purchase wheat locally, but I doubt that those amounts are adequate to resolve the current situation. I've spent 35 years explaining to diplomats that they should think of Ethiopia as a bit like the Netherlands. If there isn't a strong state there to pump out the water, a large proportion of the population will be underwater. And I think that's where we are now. We're in a situation where we've moved from a government that was extremely concerned under the PRDF period with making sure that the architecture for food security and protection against food insecurity was strong, to a government that has little concern for this issue and probably, in my view, little understanding of this issue. These are a government now led by people who grew up in other much more fertile, much more verdant cash crop parts of the country, and this has its own impact. Secondly, I think it's rather important to stress that all of these conflicts in Tigray, in Amhara, in Oromia, but also elsewhere, the Somali region, for instance, and the Somali-Afar conflict, are all connected, in my view, with a deeper political problem, which is stemming from this determination to centralize power in the person of the Prime Minister. And this is deeply problematic for me, and I think the European Union would be advised to take this extremely seriously. This process means that a number of the initiatives, like a national political dialogue, for instance, or a process of transitional justice, are not really worth much more than the paper they're written on. And much as one would need to continue to engage with these processes, one shouldn't hold out much hope that they will resolve the current situation.
So, Guled, you've seen that she talked about food shortages. She talked about how to think of Ethiopia as like Netherlands. Did she talk about how the EBRDF is better in terms of food security than this government? What say you?
Well, I think, her job, from what I understood, was to give a response based on data. So I think the element of her description of government intent is insulting. It is classic European colonialism, looking down on African governments, doing whatever they're attempting to do. You could say that data shows. And she started saying the data shows, but I think she veered off essentially in a colonial type mindset. So I think the first half of that response, or the general response for whatever accurate data she had, the argument itself undermines itself by just the way the neo-colonialism, the way that she's describing government. They're not capable, they don't understand. I think all of that is just unnecessary. The population boom when EPRDF came into government and now is completely different. The global warming impacts on water is completely different than 20 years, 30 years ago. So I think there's a lot of data that she could have used to leverage the point that she was making without being so insulting. So if I can go back and then come forward again with respect to my friend Atanafu's response, it's not unusual to have these international security agreements. In fact, this same week, Ethiopia signed a memorandum of understanding with the UK, and they called it, I'm reading real quickly, Enhance Peace and Stability in Kenya's Somalia-Ethiopia border. And it was signed by UK Ambassador Darren Welch and Ambassador Jamaluddin. And the idea was that the UK would assist Ethiopia in protecting its borders, or essentially protecting the border lines between Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia. And the concern that I have with that agreement, particularly because it focuses on border, is that it is so specific that it's written within the expectation that there will be border issues. And that's sort of where the red flag for analysts goes off, in saying, what is the concern that pushes you to do that? But the idea of agreements, if I can disagree with my friend a little bit, is normal. Japan and US have a similar agreement. China and Pakistan have an agreement. Australia, Indonesia have a maritime agreement. The 5-power defense agreement, Australia, Malaysia, New Zealand, Singapore, and the UK. So there are a lot of agreements. Shanghai, there's another one with Russia and Belarus. So trying to stabilize your region by partnering with a larger military, that you are in political agreement with. It's not new, it happens, but the question then becomes the underlying concern that Nafu mentioned, which is this power is from the outside and they could very well take over your security and therefore basically render you useless. So that's where we're going to have to see Somalia and Turkey implement that agreement. With respect to the underlying question of concern in terms of stability, in terms of governance, in terms of cooperation, we do see in the Horn of Africa, I see in the Horn of Africa now, that there was a sense of cooperation that existed that no longer exists. Kenya and Ethiopia, the two largest in the Horn or in East Africa, are no longer, the bilateral relationship is no longer evident, particularly on the economic level. We see the tension within the Somalia. We see now new tension developing Ethiopia, Eritrea. And then we see that Djibouti, if I can go back real quickly, this week has been very interesting. So Somalia enacts the agreement with Turkey. Ethiopia signs an agreement, MOU, with the UK, saying that UK will assist in protecting the borders of the Horn of Africa. And Djibouti signs a similar agreement with Turkey that was done very, very quietly, all within the same week. So that means the international arena that's looking into the Horn of Africa are expecting a level of security, instability, a level of war, a level of conflict beyond militias. And therefore, people are now, international partners are coming in to try to play a preventative role. And that's where the real concern is, that the underlying concern in the shift, which is again the point back to the American soldier who's saying that they are predicting a level of instability. And that's what is causing the general concern all over.
Okay. Atnavu, your perspective on the video that we just played, and piggyback whatever response that you wanted on Guled's response to yours.
Well, the report of Dr. Sarah Bond, I didn't see the way my friend Guled sees it as the colonial mindset, but I see it as a person, a scholar who is responsible, responding to the situation, horrific situation, humanitarian crisis in Ethiopia. And don't forget the hearing that Dr. Sarah responded was the EU, the European Union hearing, and the topic was alarm bells ringing about Ethiopia. Alarm bells means the level of the danger in that country and in the Horn of Africa is at the level of bell alarming, which is dangerous. It's very dangerous. That's the situation. So they are responding for that. So I don't blame her for her comments that the Ethiopian government even didn't understand the level of food security or insecurity in the countries they are dealing it. And they compare the current government with the EPRDF, and the EPRDF was much more better in understanding and preventing or creating appropriate policy for food insecurity. And the world was collaborating with the EPRDF government. If there's a drought or famine in any region, they had staff in Ethiopia, and they create preparation even before it turns into famine in the old days. Also, we have been fighting against EPRDF. When you compare in terms of food security and insecurity with this government, I think this government is negative. It is below zero. Number one, she was right to say they don't even understand what food security is. What's the consequence of this famine?
The EPRDF government, let me push back. The EPRDF government and Abiy's government is the same, except minus the Tigray. So the whole team that who was working for the EPRDF are working with this government.
No, I don't agree that
Who?
she was. No, there is a data, Yasin. You
Yeah,
and me were fighting against PPRD for so long.
I
Uh,
know.
we don't have a positive relationship with them. I know this government is extension, but what's going on now? What
Mhm.
is the government saying when the world is crying and the people and the community who are starved are crying in need of food
No, no,
shortage?
no,
What
no.
is
I
Abiy
get
Ahmed
that.
saying?
I want to differentiate that. I want to differentiate.
No, no, no,
Uh,
no. As a big
okay,
picture, what is the head of the government saying? He doesn't have food shortage. He
okay.
doesn't have people in starved in Ethiopia. That's what Abiy was saying. And he said he has surplus food, which is wheat. He produced surplus wheat and he's ready to export to Kenya and other countries. He's telling the world, don't send me wheat because I don't have any people who are in need.
No, no.
And this
I
is
got it. I
against the
got it. I got it.
facts.
I got it.
So
Okay,
they
I
need
got
to be
it. So,
blamed for that, and they are responsible for one man, 400 people, 400 Tigrayans and Amharas dead by food shortage in the last 3 months. 400 people. And
oh,
more than three,
okay.
4, 5 million people will be dying very soon unless this problem is addressed. And Abiy is a obstacle. He's saying, don't help me. I can take care of it, but he doesn't have any to take care of it. So
I wanna,
blaming
I wanna,
him
I wanna
is
ask
is
one question for Guled so that I can let him go because he gotta be out of here. But I want you and I continue this conversation after Guled leaves. Guled, another thing that when she was talking, she mentioned saying that the Somali Afar conflict. She talked about it, and she said that the reason all this conflict is happening in the borders is the government of the Prime Minister Abiy, quote unquote, wants to
Mhm.
centralize government. Because of that, he's creating conflicts between borders. How do you respond to that?
No,
Or
I
how
don't
do you read that?
disagree.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that statement. That is actually accurate. We've gotten that reporting from many different sources. We've seen the uptick in conflict between Afar and Somali. We've seen Oromo and Somali. We've seen Oromo and Amhara. So it's in line with the facts on the ground. It's in line with what we've seen. I think the analysis, that's an area where she could have expounded a little bit on the analysis. How does she connect the dots in terms of using data that the prime minister's actions or his policies have led to this? I think we didn't see that. Maybe there is. I
So
didn't
she
see that in
wasn't
her
presented as
response.
an academic the way she was talking. She was just
Right.
lecturing.
That's the problem. So that's the problem. The lecturing is the problem that I've had. If she simply presented a statement, a thesis, and then showed us facts, then that would have been great. I agree with the statement. I've seen the facts. I agree with the facts. But I think my problem with that presentation was it was more of a talking about Africa, Ethiopia as a other versus an important region, an important country that needs a helping hand. And that's where I think I disagree with. With
Okay.
respect to my friend Atnaf, who I agree with you. I was working with you, my friend, 20, 30, 20 years ago. But I think the problem we have right now is if we look at the current situation through the lens of 20 years ago, we will be wrong. If we have to look at the current situation through today's lens and say, what road is Ethiopia on? What road is the Horn of Africa on? And it's abundantly clear to both people on the ground in any of those countries and international partners that the Horn of Africa is on a road to conflict. And this is why it's pulling in the attention of outside parties.
Mhm.
We've also heard reporting that Gulf countries are now taking interest, that they want to invest. And again, we don't have massive weapon factories in the Horn of Africa. If there's going to be a conflict, somebody is selling the bullets. Somebody is selling the drones, and somebody is selling those weapon systems. So I think the missing piece is having an intellectual discussion dialogue in terms of how do we go forward. And I think that isn't there yet. Everyone is doing action and reaction, and that is where it only leads to conflict because you're
Okay.
always
So
reacting
Guled,
to the previous.
since
Yeah.
lastly, uh, does right now Ethiopia reach a dead end? Does the prime minister right now where he is lost credibility on the UN, lost credibility EU, lost credibility US? and the West. And then on top of that, the only allies that he has, even China, the only allies that right now he has is the Emirate, who's tried to stabilize him. Where do we go from here? And how can we make at least a peaceful transition, if there's a transition that will be peaceful? And is it time to talk about transition the way the U.S. Military is talking about right now, after the fall of this government?
I think anytime you discuss after the fall of a government or after the dissolution or government dissolves is always a concern for anywhere, because I think you will have lawless situation and people will try to get their own retribution, their own vengeance, and so on. How I would categorize Ethiopia, I would categorize Ethiopia as a country that's in serious trouble. I would categorize Ethiopia as a country that's on a path that isn't sustainable, that is on a path that must be pulled back. I think when you have local domestic militias and they're ethnic based, and they're saying we are being bombed and we are being harassed and we are being killed, what you then have is the fear that that population, I think, now if we're discussing the Amara region, we're talking millions and millions and millions of people, more than 30 million plus people. If those 30 million are with the close proximity to the capital, that is a big pot you don't want to stir. So I think Ethiopia did do sort of on paper the Committee for Dialogue and Reconciliation. That committee has to be seen as justifiably serious. It has to be seen as something that is neutral. It has to be seen as something that's independent of the control of the government. So that's an avenue where you can have people voice their concerns. But I think the road Ethiopia is on right now is very, very concerning. At the same time, I would hate to start with the narrative of when the government falls or when the government dissolves or when this region breaks off. Because then at that point, people will then begin to think of, if that happens, when that happens, how do we calculate our retribution? Who do we go after first? And at that point, you'll have millions and millions of people who, on an ethnic level, may fight each other, as we've seen in the Balkans. So you don't want that. But what you do want is a serious analysis to say, the road we're on is not sustainable. And where does this conversation go? Last point, we did see the prime minister, like Atnafu was saying, openly say there is no starvation, where at the same time WHO was saying there's starvation. He did say that people are getting the right nutrition, where at the same time, Amnesty International and everyone is saying that people are randomly being arrested. So I think the facts from observers and the facts as presented by the government are disconnected, and that can. So we can say the government is outright lying and they're bullying their people and they're killing their people. Or we can say, look, get your facts straight, because the international observers are not seeing what you're seeing. But at the end of the day, a massive internal conflict in Ethiopia impacts countries as far up as Egypt and as far down as Tanzania, and definitely across the Red Sea into the Gulf nations. So it's a big concern.
Thank you, Gulet. Atnafu, take it from there.
Well, there is a lot. Don't go, Mr. Gulet, before you hear this.
I have to go. I have to go. Literally, my time is up. I really have to go.
You have to go.
Go ahead,
You have to wait until. So, because you raised a very alarming conclusion about this government, I understand your concern, but assessing the situation in Ethiopia, do you believe that we have a lawful, or do we have a government functioning like the government we know, whether it is dictatorial or communist or democratic elected government? I disagree on your assessment that if this government fails, that it will be catastrophic to our people because of the ethnic tensions and other parts. But most people do not believe we have the government this time, honestly. I believe we have a government in that country this time. Do you know why? Why do you think people raise their arms to take care of their community. Why? Because they don't have a government, whether it is local or federal, to take care of their security. I told you, 40 miles from Addis Ababa, in Bishoftu or Debre Zeit, an armed group will come and destroy a monastery. And that was not the first time. It had been warned a lot of times. These bandits were going to that monastery several times, and the government is aware of what's coming. They let it go. Wherever people are massacred in any region, not only Amara, Oromo, Benshangul, be it in Somalia, people die because of protection that they deserve to get from their government. What is the basic function of the government? The basic function of any government, that people pay tax and put them and call them a government, is for their security, right? If they lost that, if they don't get that, the only option they have is to organize themselves to defend the community. And that will lead up to a stronger level that the government has to go. To my surprise, recently, even the United Nations Human Rights Commission understood this. Let me tell you one example, what they said here in their report. Let me show you, because don't copy what I share you this. What it says is, this is the United Nations High Commissioner for
Human rights.
Human rights that was already posted February 16th recently. So what they said is the gravity of, they mentioned a lot of atrocities, discrimination, ethnic groups. 4,000 people have been arrested, with reports indicating that approximately 300 have been executed, killed. And there is also a secret committee, what they call it, a security committee, established by the government, led by the president of the Oromia region, Ato Shimalis, that Reuters has investigated and posted 2 days ago. The function of this security
this is what you're talking about.
Is,
I post that one.
Yeah, you're right. Committee is, they decide who should be killed, they decide who should be arrested, they decide who should be displaced. And these are the governments. These are governors or presidents of the region and high officials of the region that are doing it. You don't have a government. You have a mafia style criminals.
Okay. All right. Now, so where do we go from here?
Don't interrupt me.
Okay, let Gulen leave, and then you and I will continue.
No. I will let him know this. What got it. The Human Rights Commission already put it in writing. What they said was, in areas where the Fanos, who are fighting against the government now in Hamara region, in the communities, in the localities that was under Fano, they are stable, no robbing, no killing, no rape. In the areas where the government forces are controlling in Amara region, there is rape, okay, there is killing. So whom should you choose now? Do I have to choose Fano or the government forces? Definitely I will choose Fano because they protect their community. Definitely in the Oromia, anybody who is struggling, raising arms and struggling for their community, the Oromia should support them, not the government, because the government is a killing machine. So that's why we don't have a government in Ethiopia. It's our culture, it's our religion, it's our long-last government and community relationship that is sticking until now. We should have been collapsed since this government came. But we don't have to rely on
I get you. You and I will argue at this point.
we don't have to rely on this government. We have to make a pressure. Even the United Nations acknowledge that Now, we as a citizen of Ethiopia, we need to give up hope on the government because they are not functioning like a normal
Okay.
situation.
Okay,
Thank you.
Ato Gulet, if you want to say something,
Now you can go.
Then we can go. the Habasha say you can go now.
So then now I have to sit.
Well, if you sit and respond, you have to wait.
No. I think. Okay. We're in the three facts that I think everyone is going to agree on.
Okay.
If not, we can have that argument. Fact one: we are in the 21st century. It is highly unlikely in this now where we are with government's ability and capacity to get modern weapons that are absolutely can be very, very horrible weapons at a drop of a dime, that it is very difficult in this day and age for a revolutionary militia to defeat a standing government army. It's just not possible from every military sense. And we had this similar discussions with the Tigray. You have to let me answer. With the internal conflict with the federal government and the Tigray region, people were saying they're going to overrun this, and the basic military understanding is it's just almost impossible unless you have a wave of a population that would uprise. It did not materialize in the Tigray region, where a massive population was able to push back against the government's military. Secondly, so that's a fact number one. So unless there is a massive population that is going to overwhelm tanks, airplanes, and jets and drones, it's going to be impossible for any militia. But what the militia can do is cause enough pain that the government says, let us talk, or cause enough pain as a result that the international partners say, Ethiopia, you must have a talk. Now, that is fact one. Fact two that we have on the ground in Ethiopia today is that it is a government of 70-some ethnic groups, and the major large ethnic groups, their borders have been fixed by the previous government, and you'll have districts here, towns here that go across the border and so on. But 80%, 90% of each ethnic group's territory is fixed. That right there asks for an invitation for balkanization. So if the first is true, which I believe it is, and the second is true, which the Constitution of Ethiopia says it is, then the third element of it is that if in history, human beings are human beings, if one, the first one, and the second one are added, number three means balkanization. Now, Atnafu just simply said, and this is the concern that I have, Atnafu just simply said here that it's because of the culture and the religion that has kept Ethiopia together, the glue together. He said that. The things that undo that glue, are one and two being evident. One and two being evident washes away that glue. So the concern then is, it's the concern for that mother, for that grandmother. It's not for the 30-year-old man who can fight. It's not for Atnafu, a major who understands military. It's for the civilians who will be trampled upon. And I think the element that has to happen, if it does not happen, that Fano and the government must talk. They have to talk. Now, I'm saying the government because internationally, at the regional level, at the continental level, and at the UN level, the government of Abiy Ahmed is recognized as the government of Ethiopia. Now, if the question then becomes, does that government control 100% of Ethiopia? I will tell you, no, they don't. But the second question then is, can that government monopolize the security or the threat of violence in Ethiopia? The answer is yes. We've seen what happened in the Tigray region. I don't want the same to happen in Amhara region, because then you will have devastating impacts. Right now, it's front to front, face to face. Simply, and you were a pilot, a jet that's fully armed going over residential areas can cause a tremendous amount of destruction. The narrative has to be walked back. If the narrative is not walked back, both by the government of Abiy Ahmed and both by Fano, who has showed themselves to be extremely effective given limited resources, the narrative has to be walked back. Otherwise, we are welcoming disaster. And this is what the international community is saying by their actions. Excuse me, by their actions.
Atnafu.
Yes.
Okay. Respond.
Yeah. Well, I understand the logical argument, and that the scenario that my friend Golid put it. Yes, there is a danger, but that danger will be prevalent if the fighting forces are irresponsible and politically ignorant, and they don't understand, or just Fano is fighting to liberate Amharas only and disregard the interests of other ethnic groups. Yes, that's dangerous. But what we have seen now in the political aspect of the fighting forces, the leaders talking directly, is they care about other communities as well. They understand what is the stake on the road. They don't want to defeat the military by their own and come to the palace and rule everybody by force. That's not the fighting objective of Fano. The fighting objective Fano is first self-defense for dignity and survival, because Amhara has been marginalized, Amhara has been killed everywhere, and Amhara lacks either local or federal security forces that can hinder them from being prosecuted and killed. So now they raise arms to say, okay, we'll protect ourselves. But why this war started is the government went to the Amhara region to disarm those people who are trying to protect their community. So we had no choice but to fight back, because that's meant to be against our survival. It's not about any luxury or it's not about political power. So
Atnafu,
yeah,
we'll let Gulet go, and then you will continue. Okay.
yes.
So Gulet, thank you very much.
Thank you,
It's
John.
interesting, but we'll continue.
Yes, sir. I'm ready.
The two militaries, but for the record, I'm not a pilot, and I was not a pilot. I was ground officer, not pilot.
But the Air Force, that's what your department was.
Well, I am, but I was just yeah. So I don't want to misrepresent myself.
Fair enough. Air Force Major, that's what we're gonna leave it there. Okay. But Atnafu, the point that Gulet was making it, and that I wanted to emphasize, is that right now he's saying that through negotiation is the best way for solution in Ethiopia. Military solution will not resolve anything. Do you agree on that, at least?
Well, in principle, even after you win the battle, you go to the table to settle a normal course of the government. So negotiations is inevitable, but the parties are different fighting forces or political groups may have different interests, but they need to agree to disagree on why they are opposing the government, but they need to have conditions. But one thing that I can tell you from the Amhara perspective is the Abiy Ahmed regime is fulfilled a war crime against the Amhara people. Somebody and negotiating.
What happened?
Negotiating with them could happen, but that negotiation should bring accountability for those who massacred the people. Number one. Number two, definitely there should be a transitional government that will take us to a mutual agreed government, whether it is changing the constitution, whether it is changing in any political dimension, that why are we here now, and what was the problem, and how we go from here. I think different political groups and stakeholders has to sit down and negotiate and settle these problems in a negotiation. But I don't think an Amhara will want to see the prosperity party, whether it is Amhara or Oromo or anybody who did these atrocities to the civilians, to come back and say, I am your ruler. I represent you by force, by hook or crook. That will not be happening. But
So
beyond that,
what's the lesson that we learn? Because the time is up for us. In terms of the Tigray, when Tigray was being killed, the Amharas, the Somalis, the Oromos, everybody was clapping. They were happy for the massacres of the Tigray. Right now, Tigray is not even what it was 30 years ago. Even worse in terms of economically, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of right now. So that's what happened. The Amhara region right now, it's happening. The Oromia, it's not even the Oromo people are not all happy what's happening. Majority of the Oromia region is in war. Where do we go from here at NAFU?
well, the lesson from the Tigray war is that those communities or nationalities who support that war should understand that they were cheated, they were misled. Amaras were misled and dragged into that war. The Somalis and other nations and nationalities were misled, and that was the propaganda machine of Abiy and naive political activists and medias who did not understand the ultimate objective of Abiy, that they were victims of his false propaganda, and they supported him. And not only the Ethiopians, Eritreans were dragged into the war. They were called to fight alongside with Abiy. The Gulf nations, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, were instrumental, including supplying drones, equipments, and even operating the drone to fight against the Tigrayans. And what happened to the Tigrayans? Yes, many thousands or millions died. But could they avoid that? I don't think so. If you ask any Tigrayan now, they're not regretting what they did. They believe that was their sovereign right to defend themselves when they were invaded, and they did courageously. They crushed the military and get them out from the Tigray territory, came as far as 130 kilometers from Addis Ababa. But they made a grave mistake. After they arrived in Amhara, the Amharas were misled too. They thought that they are invaded by the Tigrayans because they have to come across Amhara to come to Addis. Okay, and there was other local disputes, issues like Wolkite, Raya, and other territorial disputes. And there was also the propaganda that was propagated that the Tigrayan, the TPLF was against Amhara ever since, something like that. So that propaganda worked, and the Amhara thought they were invaded, and they tried to defend themselves. But the Tigrayans were making a press release that we don't want to fight with you. Just keep your arms and just sit in your home. We just want to pass. And our issue is with the central government. But the Amhara didn't listen. They told us they are defending. Some of them, they fight back. The Amharas died. The Tigrayans died. And the Tigrayans also, before they decide to come to Addis Ababa, they were advised by the Americans and the Westerns. You cannot do that because your political credibility was already lost by this propaganda. and you cannot unify the country, you better build up relationship with other people or political parties before you come to Addis Ababa and try to seize the capital city. But they were not listening. They thought they are winning. They pushed back by their own. They were warned, but in spite they were warned. They pushed back to come, and they were crushed in Amhara region. That's what happened. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
what's
the lesson learned.
Yeah.
Yeah, the lesson learned from here, what Abiy wants us to believe is they warning Amharas that this happened to Amharas. So now your choice is between to be enslaved of Abiy or die with your dignity. I rather most Amharas will prefer to die with dignity than to surrender. When we were occupied in 1896 by Italians, our traditional army defeated the Italians in the Battle of Adwa in 1896. And we were the only country who were free in Africa, while everybody else was colonized. It's not because we were superior. It's because of the courage. But that courage costs us a lot of lives. It's worth fighting for your independence. The same thing now, if you ask any Amhara, a 6-year-old Amhara now, a shepherd, you ask him, they understand why Fano is fighting. That's why it's very difficult for them to win this war. So they want us to believe that, oh, they did this to Tigray, they're going to do it to Amhara, saying we need to surrender. No, we're not going to surrender. We fight. If we have to die, if millions die, we die. But trust me, ultimately, we will win. You know what's happening now in Amhara region? They are killing own military for not fighting courageously, especially the South. It is in the United Nations Human Rights Commission report that has to be investigated that the military is killing its own military because they are not fighting for against Amharas, especially the southern region nations and nationalities. They don't want, because they understand they don't have any reason to fight with their brothers. We're not enemies, and we're the same country. How could a Somali come and fight with Amhara, or Amhara come to fight with Oromo while we are in the same country and brothers and sisters to defend somebody's ego, somebody's illusion? You know, so this is a choice of,
there's one point
give me this. That's it. Give me freedom or this.
One point that we need to make is, Atnaf, we understand that is the end of any government when it starts fighting with its own civilians, and when it's using its drones and airplanes and all that. But what I'm looking for is that what is the solution? What is the last message that you want to send to people in the world, the Horn of Africa, Ethiopians, and everyone else, and the Prime Minister himself, which I know will be watching this?
Well, I would like to tell the Prime Minister, you may love to stay in power. You told us that you have been dreaming and working hard to get here. There's nothing wrong to aspire authority. If that was your destiny, if you think that was your destiny, nothing wrong to think that you should be a leader of Ethiopia. And we trust you, and we try to support you when we told us that you are going to make us united. There will not be any persecution because of political differences, ethnic differences, including yourself and myself and other people. We supported him when we came into power, trusting what he said was correct. But what happened later? Mr. Prime Minister, you lost credibility from your people now. If I were you, it doesn't have any reason to stay in power where you are not, you don't have any constituency now from either from your Oromo background or the Amharas or others. If you are at this stage, be courageous to give up power and call on all oppositions and say, you don't want me? I don't want to be a reason this country to be balkanized. And my name written in history, the so-called Abiy Ahmed came into power and disintegrated the country. These millions of people who died. Don't take that. You have children, you have the family. I don't know whether you have a good nation or not, but this is not the right way to lead a country. We are in trouble. You are in trouble. If you are, as a human being, as a citizen of Ethiopia like you, I will tell you with respect, power has a limit. If you can't make it, you didn't make it. 5-6 years is enough for you to prove that you can lead. Didn't happen. Millions died. Now millions are in the urge of dying, but people are not going to give up for their freedom. This will continue if you prefer to stay in power. So now call on all people. Come on, select your elders, negotiate, and take the power. I don't want it. Say, I don't want it. I don't want to be a reason for this. And I will advise you, like, I'm a little bit older than you, I guess, and we are both military background. So that's my advice to him. But other opposition and communities, it is honestly sad to see when one part of the community is being targeted, the others are silent or collaborating with the regime or quiet. It will knock to your door next day if you don't act now. If one part of the country or ethnic group is targeted, we feel ashamed for seeing where our Tigrayan brothers were killed in that level and millions of people. Now the Amaras and Oromos continue. So we need to come together. You don't have to raise arms. Come together in a peaceful manner and ask your local governments and others, you know what? Enough. Enough. We got enough. People are starving. The inflation is too much to bear.
Okay.
There's no safety. People cannot move from one area to area peacefully. You can be hijacked and put somewhere and ask it millions of money to put in a bank account where there is a government. Then that's why I said, do we have a government? If you put in a illegal account number and you are asked by somebody, if you don't pay me a ransom of 1 million birr, you will die. And you put that money in a legal bank and send it, that means government is complicit or it's out of control. If the government official is not complicit, that means you cannot rule. You couldn't rule. You don't have any control on your government. If you are at this level, until people have to come together in a peaceful manner and say, we need a change. Let that change come, sit down and negotiate and correct what makes us to get here and move on. That's my advice. And we need to pressure the international community now. They are aware. So we need to pressure the international community to play the part, not really cosmetic thing that you know what, the government should improve this, that. No, they cannot improve. They proved it. They cannot improve anything. They have to go, but they need to seek alternative solution, radical alternative solution. That's my message. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought Napu will leave it there until next Saturday. We going to end the program right here. Thank you for watching the dialogue, which is a conversation that we have and talk about the hard issues. Even though we have, it looks like we have a different opinion, our goal is the same, and that is why we want to welcome all perspectives. At NAPU, I just want to underline one thing: he was against TBLF until it falls. So it's not somebody who's a TBLF supporter. If some of you think that he's advocating for the Tigray people, he's supporting TBLF. I just want to underline that. Thank you, Atot Nafu.
Thank you, Brother Yasin. See you next time.
See you.